All right, here's an interesting documentary, Egypt, the Other Homeland, Al Jazeera, which talks about how up until the 1950s and 60s, under the really under, up until the 40s, 1940s and early 1950s, you had these people living in Alexandria and Cairo, many times who had foreign passports, Italians and Greeks who lived there. Some of them were bilingual in Arabic just from whatever school they went to or whatever district they grew up in. Some of them did not speak Arabic and they just spoke Italian and French or Greek and French. French was kind of one of the languages of education back then. And it talks about how the economy of the Kingdom of Egypt relied on the expertise of both Arabic-speaking Muslims and Christians, but then also Greeks who were formerly part of the Ottoman Empire in the 1800s, and then Italians who were coming from these different Italian kingdoms. One of the reasons these Italians and Greeks had foreign passports in the 1900s was because Greece broke off of the Ottoman Empire in the late 1800s. So Greeks of the Ottoman Empire living in Egypt were able to get Greek passports. And then Italians in the late 1800s, the Italian kingdoms united into a single Italy. So Italians living in Egypt were able to get Italian passports. And by the mid-1900s, the Egyptian government and military began to believe that too much of the economy was controlled and managed by foreign passport holders. So they began to reform their passport citizenship system to create a situation where only Egyptian passport holders could control a lot of the businesses, banks, and the Egyptian government went further by having the government take control of a lot of private businesses and private banks. This was part of Egypt's turn towards socialism, al-Ishtirakiyya, in the 1950s. And by the 1980s, the government reversed course, went back towards giving private companies and business families control of banks and companies, because the belief there on the capitalism side was that it would be easier for Egypt to participate in international trade and trade exchange if private companies were managing the economy. This is where many Egyptians say, well, then maybe the Greeks and the Italians should have been encouraged to kind of stay in Egypt, because many of them left. Some of them stayed, and a lot of that absorption or the invitation of Italians and Greeks to live in Egypt, to bring a lot of their expertise in modern agriculture, tobacco production, public arts, music, cinema industry, music industry in the 1800s. A lot of that the banking industry. A lot of that was the outcome of the work of this sultan, but who came to be known as the Khedive, Khedive in Turkish, Muhammad Ali, who ran Egypt independently, Egypt and Sudan, but officially he was ruling under the Ottoman Empire. Similar situation as the Tunisian Bey, independent in Tunisia in the 1700s, but officially under the Ottoman Empire. So let's take a look at what they're saying about the innovations in the 1800s that Muhammad Ali introduced. Egyptians today celebrate Muhammad Ali and the dynasty for their work in introducing kind of British and French style industrial revolution into Egypt, which attracted a lot of Italians and Greeks for jobs. Even though Egyptians also celebrate the role of the military in the 1950s and 60s for moving in a different direction than the Muhammad Ali dynasty.
In Egypt was due to this man, Muhammad Ali.
Ο Μухαμμαντ Άλι ήταν ο ισχυρότερος ηγέτης σε όλη τη Μέση Ανατολή. Διεκδίκησε από τον Σουλτάνο και πέτυχε πράγματα. Ο Μухαμμαντ Άλι αποφασίζει, καλός ή κακός, να φτιάξει μια ευρωπαϊκή πόλη και να αναβιώσει τα λιμάνια τα οποία είχαν ερημωθεί. Και φέρνει ανθρώπους και αυτοί οι άνθρωποι έρχονται να κάνουν κάτι συγκεκριμένο. Να δουλέψουν. Οι Άγγλοι έρχονται να οργανώσουν το στρατό και την αστυνομία. Οι Γάλλοι να οργανώσουν το στόλο που είχε χαθεί στο Ναβαρίνο. Να δουλέψουν. Οι Άγγλοι έρχονται να οργανώσουν το στρατό και την αστυνομία. Οι Γάλλοι να οργανώσουν το στόλο που είχε χαθεί στο Ναβαρίνο και τα λιμάνια. Οι Ιταλοί είναι οι αρχιτέκτονες. Οι Έλληνες είναι οι έμποροι.
All right, let's look at that, what he just said here. So in the 1800s, Muhammad Ali wanted not only the Greeks and the Italians, but even some British and French administrators to help the Egyptian kingdom model itself after the British and the French. And the reason the British and the French would be happy to do that is because, kind of like bankers, they would be taking fees for this kind of consulting work, and then maybe even they would be able to get the Egyptian kingdom to be under the influence of the British and the French. So the British and the French are kind of competing with one another. They don't necessarily want to invade and take over the Egyptian kingdom, but they would like to be these kinds. They would like to bring the Egyptian kingdom under British or French influence. So let's take a
Οι
look.
Γάλλοι, και αυτοί οι άνθρωποι
So he's saying here, I just muted this guy. He's a Greek guy who was born and raised in Alexandria in the early 1900s. The British ran the army and the police. So the French worked on the ports in the navy. The army's not the navy. The Italians worked as architects, and the Greeks worked as business people in the ports for import export and in the agricultural world. So this is, and a lot of the Greeks came from this region of Kavala, which is Kavala around the Greek islands, Albania, Macedonia, and so this was the idea, to bring in international experts, and that's kind of it. That's what Muhammad Ali was doing. He was trying to make the Egyptian kingdom modeled more after London and Paris, and he did this with the help of the British and the French themselves, army, navy experts, and then he also did this with the help of Italian architects and Greek business people who worked at the ports, shipping, moving industrial machinery and agricultural stuff in and out of the region there. This other guy here is saying that Muhammad Ali's ambition was to bring prosperity to Egypt, especially through agriculture. So to kind of rural renewal, agricultural renewal. This was where they said, this is where the Greeks said, why don't you, the Egyptians, start mass producing cotton and exporting cotton, particularly as in the late 1800s in the United States, there was a civil war in the United States. Cotton production was reduced. Cotton was exported to the British. So the Greeks and Egypt said, why don't you Egyptians start to mass produce cotton and also mass produce tobacco for cigarette production. This guy, Christos Kavalis, head of the Cairo Greek community, this is somebody, if you met him today, he would have gone through modern Egyptian public education, or maybe he went to a private school where you still have to follow a public education curriculum. And so he today is certainly a bilingual Arabic and Greek speaker. I had students like this. There are some Greeks of Alexandria still left today who have not left for Greece or the United States. They are bilingual Egyptian Arabic Greek speakers and with Greek names. And this guy is one of them. And he's talking about the history of the community. Someone like this 100 years ago may have spoken Arabic with a Greek accent and probably was bilingual in French. Part of the reforms of the 1950s onwards in the public education system was to make sure all Egyptian residents with an Egyptian passport if they go to a public or private school, that they are going through an Arabic language curriculum as part of it. Very interesting.